And good evening, Minister. Now, as been stated, the National Drug Strategy is coming to an end. So you imagine that preparation should be ongoing to review this current strategy, to learn from it and to inform the next strategy or where we go from here. But stakeholders have expressed concern that there's been a lack of consultation on the ground. And many organisations working in our communities, they know what's going on. They are working with people with addiction problems. They're working with their families. And yet they're not being properly supported. They're not being engaged with. The biggest issue probably is the lack of funding. Many of them are Section 38 or Section 39 organisations. They're not provided with multi-annual funding, and they have a huge issue with retention of staff. And staff are not being paid sufficiently for the work that they are actually doing, which is vitally important. I mean, the outlook of the drug strategy is the correct one. It's a health-led approach. But when someone with a drug or alcohol addiction seeks help, they need to be able to access that help there and then. Not being told that there's 3 months or a 6 months waiting list for services, which is what's happening in my home area at the moment. There's huge waiting lists for any sort of help. I mean, I taught in a secondary school for many years, and I wouldn't like to sit down and actually write down all the names of my former pupils who are now deceased as a result of drugs, because there are too many of them. Young lives cut short because they didn't get the help that they required. Some due to accidental overdose, some due to suicide because of the mental health issues which relate to drug abuse, and some because of drug intimidation and debt intimidation as well, unfortunately. And it leaves behind devastation in families, it leaves behind devastations in communities. And you hear a statement all the time that drugs are everywhere, it's commonplace, and it's so frightening. As the mother of 2 sons in their teenage years, I'm frightened for them, and all I do is try and talk to them and ensure, or look, I can't ensure, I just hope that I can get through to them that they will stay away from drugs. But drugs affect everybody. They affect every community. They affect people from all socio-economic backgrounds. But those that come from a background where there's poverty and where there's deprivation, where there's perhaps intergenerational poverty and deprivation, where there's maybe intergenerational addiction, find it more difficult to get the help to get out of that situation. So we need to see investment in communities. So as well as the health-led approach for those who have addiction issues, we need to see investment in communities which have suffered deprivation and intergenerational poverty, because that will make all the difference. How often do I hear there's no place for young people to hang out? And I see it in myself. There's no place for many of them in many of our communities to go. And they end up taking the wrong choices, or they end up going to the pub. That's because that's the only option to them to socialise and mix. And that's the wrong message to be sending our young people. We should have facilities for our young people. We need to invest in our communities. Our prisons are overcrowded. And we heard, Minister, you were on the Disability Committee, we heard from the prison, the prison service, about how many people are in prison because of mental health issues. And they shouldn't be in there. That's not the place for them. The same with people with addiction problems. That is not where they can get the proper help. They need the help. So we need to see a decriminalisation of people for possession of drugs, and we need to see them then given the opportunities to engage in health-led services, and we'll steer them hopefully away from drugs, away from drink and addiction problems, and into a different sort of a lifestyle. We need to see an increase in funding for both our local and regional drug and alcohol task forces. I mean, it was cut drastically at the time of the recession. They are the services that should never be cut, because we need to support people in our communities on an ongoing basis, and not just lead them to the wolves as such. We need to see proper funding to support recovery services, like a publicly owned community operated rehabilitative and detoxification inpatient facilities. And we also need to see support for dual diagnosis of mental health and addiction, because they go hand in hand. And just to acknowledge the great support our resource centres are given to families in the community, and many of them end up dealing with, with trying to provide services to people with drug and alcohol issues, and they're not being funded properly. And again, we need to see proper funding put into our resource centres and all our community-based centres to support people in our communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Tully.